Hello and welcome to the Flipside, another episode of the Flipside with me, your host, Dr. Michael Nichols. I am really excited for today's episode, and I am glad that you are here to watch this episode as well. Um, uh, the way I wanted to start this episode was by playing the old Rascals song, "It's a Beautiful Morning." But of course, copyright laws prevent me from doing that. So you'll just have to deal with my poor singing voice with that. But it is a beautiful morning here in America, with Bobby Kennedy now as head of HHS. The weight on my own personal shoulders feels like it's been lifted, even though I wasn't doing anything. I feel ecstatic for the future of this country. I feel really encouraged with the direction now with him as the head of HHS. I know that there may even be people watching this show, very possibly, who their thinking is not aligned with mine, and they think of RFK Jr.'s confirmation as Secretary of Human Health and Services as a bad thing. But I would encourage you to keep an open mind. I would encourage you to begin doing the deep dive, begin doing the research regarding vaccines, because that's most likely the reason why someone would be fearful of him being in charge of HHS, is because of vaccines. The truth is out there, as they say, right? So I'm ecstatic about that. Now, before we get into today's topic, what I wanted to do is actually share a video clip from not RFK Jr. and his acceptance speech, which was fantastic. I thought it was brilliant and fantastic, and warmed my heart to see him getting the accolades that he so completely deserves after his years of service for this cause. But instead, I want to show you the video clip of Del Bigtree. Now, if you don't know who Del Bigtree is, Del Bigtree was a producer on regular television. He was a longtime TV producer. He produced the television show The Doctors, which I think is still running. I've never watched an episode of it. I don't need to watch three medical doctors in their scrubs up on stage telling me medical advice, but more power to you. But he produced that show and many others, and he left that industry to do the documentary film Vaxxed, which was essentially the documentary video or documentary movie of William Thompson's whistleblowing regarding MMR research. That led him down a rabbit hole, and it's been many years now. I don't know if Vaxxed came out. When did Vaxxed come out? Maybe 2000, I don't know, 17 maybe? I'm not positive. But he then went on to create The High Wire. Now, if you have not watched The High Wire, I highly, highly encourage you to watch The High Wire. It is released every Thursday. It is oftentimes 2 or 3 hours long, sometimes more. So let's say 2 to 4 hours long. So it's very long, and you may want to watch it in chunks, but the entire purpose of The High Wire is to inform information that you're not getting from the legacy media. Okay. The legacy media, as most of you hopefully already know, is a bought and paid for system. The amount of information that comes out of them that is just bald-faced lies, half-truths, and misdirection is ridiculous. So no wonder that podcasts have become such a big source of information for people. A lot of people may be worried about that, but you're getting crap information from the legacy media. So if you think you're getting crap from the podcast, then hey, we're equal, right? So choose your poison, right? But the High Wire has a policy of transparency. And so when they talk information on their show and they're talking research and they're talking science, if you have signed up for their emails after the episode, after every episode, you will get an email with all of the references that they used, so that you, instead of just believing what they said, can actually look up those references and discover it for yourself. Are they telling the truth? Are they exaggerating? Are they making stuff up? You can do that. I think that's amazing. If every news source did, we're going to say this about this person, we're going to say this about this research, and here's our research. I think that would be an amazing thing to do. And that's what the High Wire does. So I encourage you to watch the High Wire every Thursday. You can look it up on your computer. You can sign up for it. They send out video or text messages on your phone, and you can watch it on your phone. That's typically what I do, is I listen to it on my phone while I'm driving. But irrelevant of that, for the past 2.5 years, Del Bigtree has been Bobby Kennedy's communications director. And this conference, this press conference that was held just not too long ago, was the MAHA Alliance conference. Now, once again, MAHA is Make America Healthy Again. It really has nothing to do with MAGA. Okay, it's associated with it now only because Trump's the president and Kennedy works under him. Okay, but it's radically two separate things. The MAHA movement, as people call it, began as the health freedom movement, something that I've been involved in for an incredibly long time. I have gone to protests and demonstrations at our state capitol. I have written hundreds of letters and left hundreds of voicemails to senators, representatives, etc. And I have gone to dozens of conferences and educational meetings and group meetings of other people within the health freedom movement. It is an amazing group of individuals, of people, and that movement has morphed into now MAHA. And in this press conference, Del Bigtree does something that I've never seen him do. He really let his anger show. Usually he's pretty cool-headed, but he let his anger show, and I was so happy for it, because he was letting it out at the press individuals there for the conference and letting them know what a crappy job they've been doing, basically. But I want to show you a little bit of this clip, so bear with me. It's several minutes long, but I think it's worth it. If you want to watch the whole thing, it's about an hour and a half, and the entire thing is fantastic. It's just under an hour and a half, but I'm going to show you maybe about 3 to 5 minutes of it. So let's do that first. Let me get in here and share that. All right, that is not what I wanted to share. All right, let's find what I need to find here. Okay, there it is. There it is. All right, so Twitter, and let me make sure I've got share sound button on. There we go. All right. So we're starting off with Senator Johnson, who has been an incredible supporter of MAHA and has an incredible open mind. He listens to information and does not allow his personal biases to totally filter everything out and not listen, which is the problem with most people. And I'm going to start off with him, and it'll then segue into Del Bigtree. So listen up. I think it's really good.
Thank you all for coming here. I was in the Oval Office about an hour or so ago and watched Neil Gorsuch, Justice Gorsuch, with President Trump present, swear Bobby Kennedy in as the new Secretary of Health and Human Services. I believe, I'm hoping this is a watershed moment for America. I described in Bobby's hearing that I remember when he called me and said that he was thinking about joining forces with President Trump. He was asking me whether he thought he could be confirmed. And the first words out of my mouth were literally, Bobby, this is an answer to my prayers. I'd gotten to know Bobby during COVID. We were trying to convey the same truths to the American public. I understand the price that Bobby Kennedy has paid fighting for children's health, fighting to get the truth out, fighting to expose the corporate capture of our federal agencies. I know the political and personal price he was going to pay for making the decision to join forces with President Trump, but I couldn't be more happy that he did so. It's important not only because by President Trump and Bobby Kennedy putting their differences aside and focusing on an area of agreement to solve a problem, it not only demonstrates exactly how you solve a problem. Let's face it, I don't agree with anybody 100%. So if I'm going to solve a problem, I'm going to set aside differences and focus on that. But I think even more important, it demonstrated to America what we are going to need to do politically to heal and unify a horribly divided nation. So to me, this is a moment of true hope. One thing I found out in all of my recent activity, whether it's working with doctors, looking at COVID and the vaccine injured, and those events I held, the event I held with Bobby Kennedy and Dr. Casey Means, her brother Callie, and all those nutritionists, is this MAHA movement. There is nothing partisan about it. I know Bobby in that one event said, I used to be a supervillain to him, the way I was portrayed in the media. But it's amazing when you actually get to know somebody, up close and personal. Those differences just melt when you focus on something so important as what is driving chronic illness. What has caused this incredible upsurge in autism? President Trump was speaking about that. Is actually a 1970 study. It's very, very hard to conduct this study, but they're trying to get some sense of what is the rate of autism, and that study revealed is about 1 in 10,000. That's back in 1970. Fast forward to today, something like 1 in 36, 1 in 34. I hear different numbers. California, it's 1 in 22. Anybody who knows a family with an autistic child, particularly a severely autistic child, I mean, this is a tragedy. These are tragedies that have to be prevented. We need to understand what's driving, what are the root causes of chronic illness, what's the root cause, what are the root causes of chronic illness. We can't be afraid to ask those questions. That's what's so unfortunate about this whole process leading up to this is people like Bobby Kennedy, they haven't even been allowed to ask the question without being ridiculed and vilified, and that has to stop. Because as I said in his hearing, the American people desperately want these answers on a completely nonpartisan basis. So, Bobby Kennedy is dedicated as the Secretary of Health and Human Services to what he describes as radical transparency. I'm the chairman of the Permanent Subcommittee Investigation. I can tell you in my investigations, the federal government is opaque. They are so far from transparent, and that's a real problem. The government belongs to we the people. The information the government collects, the analysis it does on their safety surveillance systems, it's public information. It shouldn't be withheld. So I am pleased to introduce Del Bigtree from the High Wire, a man who has been engaged in radical transparency, paid the price. Now, I think you've probably been vilified, ridiculed every now and again, but this is about the truth. This is what the American people not only want, not only demand, but they completely deserve it. So I'm just happy to play a bit part here in this enormous and a growing movement of making America healthy again. And again, at the forefront of that for many, many years, I've learned so much from Del Bigtree. I think Americans have learned so much from Del Bigtree. So my hat's off to you. Thank you for all you've done, and welcome to the stage.
Senator Ron Johnson's been a lone voice in the wilderness inside of government for many years, and we are eternally grateful for all of the hearings and the things that he has done to bring awareness to the reality that is taking place today. It's very simple. This is a story that's been blown out of proportion. The misleading facts have been coming from mainstream press. The fact is this: vaccine injury is real. It happens. People are injured every single year. Children are maimed and killed every single year by our vaccine program. There are many that will say, well, it's rare. Does that mean we shouldn't talk about it? Do we talk about rare diseases? Do we try to cure rare diseases? Why is it in this one topic you are ridiculed, attacked, said that you're spreading misinformation for stating the obvious facts? My name's Del Bigtree. I am the CEO of MAHA Alliance, MAHA Worldwide, MAHA Action. But really, I'm just one representative of many, many incredible voices in a grassroots movement, a true grassroots movement for medical freedom that started many years ago and now has found real focus in this movement that we're now calling MAHA. I want to take just one moment to thank President Donald Trump, someone who is the first candidate that we ever saw dare to make the statement that vaccines cause autism, or that he thought that they did, that he wanted to do investigations into vaccines. And I'm not talking about this last election. I'm talking about the very first one. And every time he was asked in different scenarios, or whether it was on a debate stage, he said, I have seen children run across my office that were healthy, went and got a vaccination, and suddenly we're having issues spelling and reading. And we've heard the story over and over again. I'm one of those that has probably heard that story more than most because I decided to do an investigation. I'm just like you, all of you in the room. I'm just a journalist. I'm just a reporter. No, I have no medical degree, but I did work for over 6 years on a medical talk show called The Doctors, where every single week I read medical journals to find stories of breaking news and science, and I learned to understand how to read that science, as Robert Kennedy Jr. has said the very same thing about being a lawyer. When I think, where is this movement coming from? What is it? I've seen all of the reporting. How far back do we go? Robert Kennedy Jr. began talking about this when he was first asked by parents that were coming up at his environmental hearings where he was talking about mercury in the water, saying it's toxic, it's destroying health. And those mothers said, will you please look at the vaccines? There is mercury. The same thing you're fighting to get out of our water is being injected into our children. Of course, he was reticent because mainstream media and mainstream medicine scares everyone away from ever doing any investigation into that. But eventually a mother sat outside of his door with a stack of studies, and he couldn't ignore her, and he began reading. It's much like what happened to me. I was working on the Doctor's television show, and I was tipped off that there was a whistleblower inside the CDC named Dr. William Thompson, who was going to come forward and say that they were committing scientific fraud in the vaccine safety studies, specifically the MMR autism study. I made a documentary ultimately about that because, as many of you are aware, I pitched it to my executive producers. I know who you work for. I work for CBS. And they said, we're never going to go near that story. There is no way we are going to do a story that calls out the CDC and says that they're committing fraud of any kind, because we got to go and report on the latest flu epidemic, and they would let us behind the scenes, and we would make it into television, and we're not going to hurt that relationship. We're also not going to go after a product made by Merck, who's just one of the pharmaceutical companies that fund this show and fund most of television. As you well know, if you work in television, somewhere between 50 to 70% of advertising is coming from the pharmaceutical industry, which is why you're mandated to write the things that you write and told the things that you cannot write. So sometimes it takes courage to step out and do investigation beyond that. Let me show you very quickly where that investigation should start for all of you. These are vaccine inserts. I had my COO, Bridget Rasmussen, go by a doctor and say, we'd just like to see some vaccine inserts. Twinrix, I mean, I could read them off, Haverix, Shingrix. They didn't do infants, so we didn't get hepatitis B and those things, but I find it shocking, and you should find it shocking as a reporter, how many times I've read, well, the experts say, when Del Bigtree or Robert Kennedy Jr. says that there's been no placebo-based trials to establish safety prior to licensure, I would probably put money that none of you reporters have ever grabbed one of these and read it. Or if you did, then how did you write? The experts say that that is misinformation because it's written in every single insert that shows up with every single vaccine that you've taken and that our children have been given. There's a very interesting conversation that happened during the hearings between Rand Paul and Senator Cassidy. Senator Cassidy brought up the importance of the hepatitis B vaccine, telling an anecdotal story about a young girl that he cared a lot about who was having liver failure. A tragic story, absolutely. But for Robert Kennedy Jr. and I and so many people in this room and thousands and thousands and thousands of parents, there is a story of a regression into autism or of seizures or of encephalitis, swelling of the brain in their babies after a vaccination that apparently we're not supposed to care about that story. That Bobby Kennedy can't tell that story. That child doesn't matter. In the conversation, Rand Paul pointed out that hepatitis B is a sexually transmitted. The vaccine was developed for prostitutes and people that were having extreme sexual relations or heroin addicts. And he said, I think that a parent should have a right to decide whether they vaccinate their one-day-old baby, which is when this vaccine is delivered all across America. You should be able to opt out of a hepatitis B vaccine since it is unlikely that in the near future for a day-one-old baby, they will be having extreme sexual intercourse or sharing heroin needles. So what is the purpose? And of course, Senator Cassidy, and I'm very glad that he had as many deep conversations as he did with Robert Kennedy Jr., but right before our eyes, we saw what conversation can happen when reasonable people start talking about an issue that they've never been allowed to.
So there you go. I wanted to stop it there. I mean, I personally, for myself, I could watch that over and over again, and it goes on, and it's really good. And yes, it gets a little heated, and he repeats some of his things because of the passion behind that. But I hope that when you were listening to that, you were, hopefully, I hope you get angry. I really do. I hope you get angry. That must be a weird hope that your audience gets angry, but it's sometimes through anger that we create action. We have to have some kind of intense emotion sometimes to create action. And, it is insanity, the height of insanity, the way people are treated when the topic of vaccines is voiced. If I say I'm going to talk about vaccines, if I put it into captions, up until here recently, you couldn't even post that anywhere. You posted on Facebook, got taken down, misinformation, put it on YouTube, got taken down. If you did it again, you got your account deleted. Why? Because we're questioning a pharmaceutical product? Really? That's not America. That's not America at all. America is about free speech. It's about having conversations. And if you're so scared to have a conversation about a pharmaceutical product, folks, there's a big problem. There's an incredibly big problem. So that brings up our topic today. Guess what we're going to talk about? I actually got my very first email. Yay! Thank you to Teresa from California. I got this email, and essentially all Teresa said was, let's talk more about vaccines. So Teresa, thank you for watching. And yes, today we're going to talk more about vaccines. And so that start there with Dell, I think was really good because it kind of sets the tone. We have been living, and this is why it's such a beautiful day to wake up in America now with RFK Jr. as now the head of HHS, with Maha and Dell behind Maha. There's a momentum now. There's this forward momentum now that I can feel it progressing, whereas for decades now, it has felt like spinning wheels. It has felt like 2 steps backwards for every step forward. And it has been a battle kind of in the dark. Now the light is being shown on this in a much, much bigger way. And it's allowing information to get disseminated to people easier, more thorough, and people are more receptive to it. Since all of the lies through COVID, there have been a lot of people who have woke up. Now, we're not talking about being woke, okay? They've woke up to the truth that they've been lied to for so long. The lies were so glaring with COVID that most people, a lot of people, and I'm going to say most people, because I mean, that's what got Trump reelected. That's what has all of his nominees getting put into office. That's what got, Republicans in control of so many different things, is because people were just fed up with it. They're sick of it. If you're a Democrat and you're watching this, don't stop right now. Listen to what I'm going to say. Please understand, this is not a Republican Democrat issue. It's not. It's about the health of America as a whole. It's about the health of our children, your children, my children. It's about our health as adults. It's about personal freedoms. It's about being able to make choices for your health by yourself and not have the government over you like Big Brother, forcing something into you that could be potentially deadly or toxic, right? So the direction I want to go in today kind of follows my book. The very first chapter of my book is about personal freedom. In fact, it is called point number 1, personal freedom, medical freedom. That's the very first chapter. And I made that the first chapter in my book because it really is the most important point to begin this conversation with. We could talk about autism. We could talk about safety studies. We could talk about the history of vaccines and the lies that we've been told about the history of vaccines. There's a lot to talk about there, folks. There's a lot of things like that we could talk about, and I plan on talking about all of those things. But the very first point that has to be brought up, the very first point that has to be emphasized, is the fact that it is your body, your health. How long have women been chanting that because of abortion rights, right? My body, my choice, my body, my choice. How many times have you heard that, right? And I'm not saying anything negative about that, just as a point of fact. It's been brought up forever. And it's interesting to me that that's mainly a Democratic campaign issue, is abortion rights. And on the Republican side, it's usually anti-abortion, which, once again, I think there's a lot of crossovers, and a lot of people vote on a particular party based on one particular topic. And abortion is one of the big ones. Women's rights, right? Well, guess what? This is no different. How is it so important for a woman to be able to choose what happens to her body as opposed to someone else choosing for them? But it's not as equally important for someone to be able to choose what is injected into their child. What's injected into their child? Are you saying that you're for women's abortion rights? Okay. Which, in essence, and you can't really argue this, is in essence killing something. Okay. And I'm not saying I'm pro-abortion or not. I'm saying the logical process of saying abortion rights. Okay. Yes, the right is to kill something. Okay. Gotcha. And it is your body. And I agree with that. Okay. I agree it's your body. But that's the direction of that. But at the same time, then you're going to shake your head and say that we're crazy for talking about having the right to decline potentially deadly and toxic chemicals being injected into our children. I pause there for dramatic effect. I mean, seriously, it baffles the mind. I don't understand that at all. It has always been a point that has frustrated me. It has always been a point that has pissed me off. This is a bottom line, personal freedom, health freedom, medical choice issue more than anything else. And so that's why we should start there. Now, I've done lots of seminars on vaccines, talking about these different topics. And at the beginning, I never really talked much about health freedom or personal freedom, because I think at the back of my head, I was thinking, well, of course, who wouldn't argue that? Of course, that should be that. And who would ever argue that? So I thought it wasn't really something that needed to be brought up as a point, because to me, it was common sense. Everybody would agree with that. So why bring that up? And then over the course of the years, I realized, as most people have always said, common sense ain't so common, right? And so lots of people would argue that, because they would argue this: herd immunity. Well, you can't have personal choice in that, because if you don't vaccinate, that affects me. That's like saying you have the right to smoke in my face because it's a personal right. Well, no, that's actually not a good analogy whatsoever. The idea of herd immunity is another point we can get into as a separate point, but let me first just state something, and that is that herd immunity ain't what you think it is either, okay? Not even remotely. I will tell you this, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I'm going to be pretty damn close. For decades, most of our vaccine numbers in the United States have hovered in the low to high 90s for all of our vaccinations, meaning that the rate, the percentage rate of people getting vaccinated was in those high 90s. The amount of people that were unvaccinated is a very small amount. Historically, in the past few decades, it's been somewhere in the neighborhood of a range of between like 2 to 4%. Very small percentage. The vast majority of people have been vaccinated. And so this 2 to 4%, though, has been attacked, and I mean attacked hardcore, because we're a threat to the herd immunity. How are we a threat to the herd immunity? 96% of this vaccine, 98% of that vaccine, 94% of that vaccine is people are getting vaccinated, and you're worried about the 2%? That doesn't add up when you look at the science behind herd immunity at all. And there's far more to it than that, but I'm not going to get into that aspect of it today. But the bottom line is this: it's my child. It's my body. Now you could say, well, we have to protect the child. The state has to protect the child if you're being an idiot, because that's what some people would say. They would say you're being an idiot, so we have to protect the child. So therefore, we would step in and take the child into protective custody. Same kind of thing. We're gonna make you do this. But the science doesn't support this, and this is the problem. When we talk about safety studies, vaccines are not tested the way pharmaceutical products in general are tested. We talk about placebo-blind, placebo-controlled research to show the safety and efficacy of a product, but vaccines don't get that. So to come at me and say, we've done the studies for this, we know its efficacy, we know its safety, so therefore to protect the herd, you have to do this. That's a lie. And so to force this product on me that you haven't even done the research studies on properly is criminal. And that's the bottom line. And here's the great thing: all those warrior moms out there, once again, hats off to you, to all those warrior moms who have been fighting this battle behind the scenes, in front of the lens, and wherever they could for decades now, because their kids were damaged by these products that were forced onto them, that they woke up only because of that, and they had to deal with that personal battle inside of them for the rest of their lives. That's a horrible thing to have to live with. And these women, and yes, men too, so hats off to the warrior dads. It's usually the women out there, but I will give hats off to both, okay? The warrior moms and the warrior dads out there fighting for their kids, fighting for other people's kids because they don't even know that they should be fighting. Hats off to you, and thank you for helping get Bobby put into the position that he is. I'm eternally grateful for everything that you've done over the decades and over the years, and will continue to do, I know. So when we talk about personal freedom, it's no small thing. You know, it really isn't. It's no small thing. It's something that should be the very first thing we talk about, because autonomy in making medical decisions shouldn't be something that is even questioned, really, should it? When you think about the field of medicine, if you were to type in the 4 pillars of medical ethics into your Google search, okay, you'll come up with a ton of articles referencing this basic idea, the 4 pillars of medical ethics. And in that, there is the principle for respect of autonomy, principle for non-malfeasance, principle for beneficence, and the principle for justice. Those are the 4 pillars of medical ethics. So these are supposed to be the pillars, the things that hold everything up, right? The ethical pillars that hold up medicine. Get the importance of that, because we're talking about philosophy again here. These are the ethical pillars that hold up medicine. So this is supposed to be the foundational thing that medical doctors would really hold dear to, right? And the very first one, the number one thing there is autonomy of their patients. Autonomy of the patients is number one, okay? Now, that principle, that first principle, states that any notion of moral decision-making assumes that rational agents are involved in making informed and voluntary decisions. In healthcare decisions, our respect for autonomy of the patient would, in common parlance, imply that the patient has the capacity to act intentionally with understanding and without controlling influences that would mitigate against a free and voluntary act. That's pretty powerful. And what that says is that they shouldn't be coerced or put into a position where they feel like they have to do something against their wishes. That's the very first principle of ethics for medicine. And the second one that follows right after that is the principle of non-malfeasance, which basically is the one that says to do no harm, right? I will tell you that I have had conversations with dozens. I'm seriously, I've lost count of how many medical doctors I've had conversations with who all say the exact same thing, that they had very little education in school that gave them the information they needed about vaccines. They were told the very standard issue vaccine information that all of you have been given over the years. Vaccines are the lifesavers of mankind. If it wasn't for them, we'd all be dead. That herd immunity is the most important thing, and that vaccines give herd immunity. That's a falsehood. That they are safe, effective, and that they don't cause the harm that all these other nut jobs are telling you. That's the stuff they were given, and that's it. As opposed to really delving into it and looking into the research, because there is a ton of research out there to show the fallacies in this. That's what they were given. And so they walk out into the world to give your children and to give you vaccines, and the same information they're using is the same tired diatribe that you've been sold over the years as well. So of course, they're going to walk into this adamant of how well this stuff works. And you're going to accept it adamantly because you've been told that the doctor knows what they're doing, and that all the people they've told you online, on TV and newspapers and articles and everything have all told you how perfect this stuff is, right? And now we got a problem, okay? Because it's all starting from a really bad place. It's all starting from an area where everybody has bad information. The information that the doctors are giving you and the information that you've been given even before you got to the doctor is all essentially the information that the pharmaceutical companies, the CDC, wanted you to know, and that's it. There's nothing else there. This is what Bobby's going to change. This is what Bobby's going to change. This is what his staff and everybody around that is going to work on. Not getting rid of vaccines. Calm down, folks. It's not about that. It's about making sure that there is truth and transparency. Don't you want truth and transparency, my God, I want that so much. Truth and transparency is what we need. It's what we deserve, like Senator Johnson was saying. And to fight against that illustrates the evil behind that person or the ignorance. So which one? Are you ignorant or stupid, or are you evil? Or are you both? Okay, it's got to be one of those three. You're either ignorant, stupid, evil, or you're both. Okay, it's one of those things. Otherwise, open up your ears, open up your mind, and let's have a conversation. Let's look at the evidence through a fine-tooth comb. Let's get people together to have the debate that has never existed and talk about vaccines with an open mind. And at the bottom line, and at the end of the day, what we want to do is be able to say, you know what? The bottom line is that you should have a choice. You should have a choice. Now, there are some people out there that would say, well, wait a minute, you know what? You do have a choice. You do have a choice because there are exemptions, right? So the main thing they hold over your head is that if you don't get your children vaccinated, then we're not going to let you into public school. Private school is totally different, by the way. But if you don't get vaccinated, we're not going to let you into public school. Now, once again, here's another example of the lies or myths, half-truths or misinformation that they have been giving you forever, is that that's not a true statement. I've been a teacher for a long time, and I remember talking with my students in my anatomy and physiology class when we got to the topic of vaccines. And I stated to the class, 30, 40, 50 students, that you don't have to get vaccinated. You know that, right? And they would all be like looking side to side at each other, incredulous. Dr. Nichols has to be wrong. There's no way that he's correct because they have been told that they have to get vaccinated or their kids can't go to school. And that was always a lie. Or if you want to say, no, it wasn't a lie, it was a half-truth. Okay? Because they wanted you to feel that way. They wanted you to think that so that you would just follow in line and do what they wanted you to do. There have always been exemptions. So up until fairly recently, there were 3 exemptions. There was a philosophical exemption, which means I just don't want it because I don't believe in it. There was a religious exemption, which said, based on my religious beliefs, I don't want this. And there was a medical exemption, which basically said, because myself, my sibling, whatever, has had a reaction, I can get a exemption because it's possible that I'm going to have that same reaction. And those have been around for a long time. And those who knew about them used them. But most people, the vast majority of people, knew nothing about those exemptions because they were not told about those exemptions. Pediatricians didn't tell them. The schools did not tell them. The government sure as hell did not tell them. They have programs that supposedly are supposed to educate the public about those things. But as most of you would probably testify, you didn't know about that until maybe recently. And so you might say, okay, well, then great. Now I know about that, but that also makes what you're saying erroneous because there are exemptions. So you can back out of this. You do have freedom of choice. Well, here we go. Here's where the big problem is. And some people may wonder why there have been so many people that have been so vocal about anti-vaccine issues over the past decade. Okay. In 2015, it started before this, but in 2015 is really when the big push came. There was a measles outbreak in California at Disneyland. Everybody remember that? It was all over the news. And of course, they blamed it on unvaccinated individuals. I don't remember the exact number of cases. I'd have to look it up, but it was something like, 60 cases, 90 cases of measles, something like that. And they blamed it on unvaccinated individuals. And they used that as a propaganda piece. They used that as a way to push their agenda, okay, which was to get to these people who are the holdouts with vaccines and make sure it's 100% of the population vaccinated and that nobody's questioning it anymore. Okay, stop this ridiculous questioning. Don't question anything, just accept. So that whole Disneyland measles outbreak thing, we could dissect that with a fine tooth comb, and it's been done before. Number one, the actual outbreak was not due to unvaccinated individuals. Okay, the strains of measles vaccine or measles that were tested on that, many of those were vaccine strains, which means being passed on from someone who was vaccinated already. They had all your vaccinations. Okay, so the percentage of people that were unvaccinated. Also, there were some people from out of the country. So it wasn't necessarily an America thing where it was vaccine hesitancy or whatever. Lots of different things there. Besides the fact that measles is not as deadly as they're trying to tell you either. If anybody is my age, around my age, then you can remember everybody got measles. Everybody got measles before the vaccine wasn't even on the market until 63. And so anybody who was raised in the 60s, everybody got the measles. And I didn't know anybody who died. I'm sure there were people that died, but I knew no one that died because everybody got it. They felt like crap for a while. They got over it. And guess what? You had lifelong immunity. Fantastic stuff there. And we knew that. Okay. So the percentage of deaths from measles is a very, very low thing. And so when they go crazy about measles epidemics, like the one in Louisiana right now, there's a outbreak in Louisiana, the largest one in a long time. It's something like 50 people or something like that, some really low number. And of course, they're using that to go against what the Surgeon General of Louisiana has just done, which is to no longer have vaccine mandates. Yes, Louisiana. Yes. Anyway, once again, there's lots of places we could digress with this. But to come back to those exemptions, the whole thing with the exemptions is starting in 2015, there was a huge push to eliminate all of the exemptions. Okay, a huge push. Started in California with a guy, Tran. I won't even get into Tran because Tran will make me angry and I'll have to insult him over and over again here on this broadcast. So I'll stay away from Senator Pan. Sorry, Pan. I was saying Tran. It's Pan. And they eliminated the ability to have exemptions in California. That spread like wildfire. And what ended up happening was most of the states have done some type of elimination. The philosophical exemption is now a rarity. I don't remember or know which of the states still have a philosophical exemption. It may be none. I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look that information up. But there were at least probably 20 something or 30 something states that had never had a philosophical exemption to begin with anyway. So let's say it's 29, 28, 30 states did not have a philosophical exemption. And then the ones that did started eliminating the philosophical exemption. And what they were doing was they were keeping the religious exemption because for the most part, that's hard to get rid of because of taking away religious freedoms. And they were only leaving the medical exemption for most places. So even in some places, they were fighting against it and getting rid of their religious exemptions. Though some of those places have since added that back in, which is good. So remember, philosophical was you being able to have the right to say, I don't want this. Simple. Makes it very simple. With religious exemptions, you have to show that there is a religious reason why you don't want the vaccination. Now, for most people who use a religious exemption, it's because of the aborted fetal cells. Yes, aborted fetal cells in vaccinations. Not all vaccinations have them, to my knowledge, but there is a line of aborted fetal tissue that is utilized in vaccine manufacturing. Okay. And because of that, a lot of people with deeply held religious beliefs are like, why, if I'm going to fight against abortion, I certainly don't want anything with aborted fetal tissue injected into my body, right? And so that's one of the things. The other thing is to say that, God made me healthy. God made me a perfect being. And as such, I have the power in me to be healthy, and I don't need some man-made toxic concoction put into me because I believe that God will take care of me. That's the other, way of thinking about that. So that's the religious exemption. So the point being is that most places were really moving towards only allowing the medical exemption. The medical exemption basically says this: if your child or your child's sibling had an adverse vaccine reaction, then you can file for an exemption based on the idea that because you had a reaction already, or because a sibling had a reaction and it's likely that this sibling may have it as well, then you can file for an exemption to be exempt from the vaccine. Now, the problem with that is obvious. Do I really need to go through getting a reaction that may leave me permanently disabled or dead before I can then exempt myself or my sibling from these vaccines? That sounds crazy. Yes, you can exempt yourself from the vaccines if you die first. Really? Okay, no, you don't have to die. But if you get autism, then we won't give it to your next child so that they don't get autism as well. Oh, well, gee, thank you. Okay. So, once again, the medical exemption is a joke from that perspective. The other flip side of that coin is, can you even get a medical exemption? To get a medical exemption, you have to take this injury and you have to prove, number one, that the vaccine caused it. And then you have to show that and prove it to your medical doctor so that they will then write the exemption for you. And that's almost never going to happen. To prove that the vaccine caused injury, you have to go through so many hoops and so many years of ridiculous governmental BS. And then 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get the result you want because they're going to tell you that the vaccine didn't cause it. That doesn't mean it didn't cause it, but they're going to tell you that. And then to get your doctor to accept that, and remember, this is the doctor who was taught in school to trust vaccines without question. And they're going to then believe you that it was the vaccines and write you an exemption. That's not going to happen either, especially when medical doctors, at least in the past 10 years, medical doctors were losing their licenses for doing exactly that. If they wrote too many medical exemptions, they would lose their license. So you had the government pushing for the removal of the philosophical exemption in all states, trying and succeeding to remove the religious exemption as well, and only allowing a medical exemption, which was pretty much impossible to get. And they know that. This wasn't done with, without knowing that. They knew this, okay? And so this idea of having exemptions is truth, but it also, once again, does not tell you the whole story, okay? It doesn't tell you the whole story. Now, there's another part to this. When we talk about medical freedom, we talk about those exemptions. Now, my feeling, because I'm already seeing this happen, is that at the very least, the religious exemption is going to be put back onto the schedule in all states. What I'm hoping is that they're not going to have mandates at all. Or once again, if they have mandates still, they put back the philosophical exemption and they make sure that every single person knows that they have that available. Before the shot is ever even taken out of the wrapping and put onto the tray in front of you to give you your vaccines, the doctor or the nurse should walk through all of the exemptions for the person. They should let them know, you do have the right to have exemptions. There's a philosophical, religious, and medical exemption, and these are what those mean. Do you wish to take an exemption, or would you like to have the vaccine? That's what should be happening. That's not what happens. That's what should be happening. And I'm hoping that that's what's going to happen. But the other thing about having this be solidified as choice, okay, as just choice. COVID was the perfect example for my next point with this. During COVID, we saw people losing their jobs. People were losing their jobs because they stood up and said, hell no, I'm not going to have an experimental mRNA vaccine put into me or my child. Hell no. Well, if you don't do it, you're going to get fired. And there were a lot of people that said, well, then you're going to have to fire me and I'm going to have to sue you. And I love it when I see the posts of these lawsuits finally coming to fruition and them getting their just reward and getting back pay and getting penalty pay, et cetera. And a lot of people have had that happen. Medical doctors were losing their license. People were getting fired from their jobs. People were getting banned from businesses, establishments. If you didn't show your vaccine card, you couldn't go to the movies or go to the restaurant. That, it frustrated me to all hell. There was a point when Bobby Kennedy, in one of his speeches, he made a reference to Nazi Germany and how Nazi Germany, they burned books and they wouldn't allow ideas, and how what was happening here with vaccines was similar to that in the sense of that they weren't allowing ideas. Now, of course, that was taken out of context, and he's insulting Jews and he's insulting everybody by saying that this is the same as this. No, it's not. He wasn't saying that. Okay. The idea that ideas can be suppressed in the manner that they were being suppressed, and it was getting worse and worse and worse every month. It was getting worse, was an example of how this whole thing starts. It's how it starts. Okay. No, we didn't have people lining people up and shooting them. We didn't have people in gas chambers. We didn't have things like that. Thank God. Okay. But this suppression of information is how it begins, because if you go back historically, and I'm talking way historically to even primitive civilizations, you had patriarchal societies where they didn't want women to, not just women, let me rephrase it, women or any other subset, whether it was the poor or it was a certain color of your skin or a certain nationality, didn't want these individuals educating themselves. No school for these people. Do not let them learn how to read or write. Why? Because that's how you get intelligent. That's how you learn. That's how your brain develops, and you start to think for yourself, and you say, well, wait a minute. I don't want you to do this. Wait a minute. You can't get away with this. That's called education. And so when you control the media, when you control what people are learning on the internet, okay, by misinformation, everything, then you're controlling the masses so that they don't become smart enough to understand what they're doing to you. That's the big risk. And so we think about personal freedom. This freedom of this personal freedom for health, this health freedom, this personal choice, medical autonomy. Okay. If you're taking that away from people, if you're able to hold that over people's heads as a threat, we got a problem. Okay. We got a big, big problem. Well, in America, they would never do anything like that. So, that just seems like a pointless thing to bring up. Really? The COVID pandemic was a perfect illustration of that. Now, did it all come out in the end with this control? No, and primarily because people like myself, people like you who are watching, who did what I did, we stood up and said, F you. We said, we're not going to do this. I'm not going down like this. I'm going to fight this bullshit. And that's what we have to do. Now, back in 2018, I'm pretty sure, the Argentinian government did all of this. Now, whether or not it's still going on in Argentina or not, I don't know. But they linked getting vaccinated, okay, prior to school, they required vaccination for passports, for driver's licenses, for any type of governmental certificates, et cetera, for medical procedures, for work, for residency. They required vaccination for all of that. You had no bodily choice in Argentina at all. All of that was linked to that directly. Okay. All of it. And, once again, I've had people say, well, that would never happen in America. Once again, COVID showed you that it certainly can. Okay. And besides that, the District of Columbia, I don't remember the name of the bill, and I don't remember when it went through, but they passed a bill. This would have had to have been pre-COVID. Yeah, it would have to be pre-COVID. And it stated that a minor, and I want to say the age was 11 years of age, starting at 11 years of age, a minor starting at 11 years of age could consent to receive a vaccine regardless of whether or not their parents approved or their parents were there. 11 years old. I mean, think about that. Does an 11-year-old have the capacity to make medical decisions? 100% no. A child does not have the capacity to make medical decisions. And that it didn't stop there. There were other states that were going through this exact same thing at 12, 14 years old. I want to say Oregon, I think, was one of those. Another southern state, I think it might have been Alabama. One of the Carolinas, I don't remember. All of them had bills that either were in the works or had already passed that were doing the exact same thing at a different age. DC, I think, had the lowest age at 11, but otherwise it was 12, 14, 16. Allowing these children to make decisions, medical decisions, that they don't have the capacity to do. And here's the even one of the worst parts of those bills is that there was no, they didn't have to tell the parents, not the kids. The schools, the hospitals, whoever was doing this with the vaccinations did not have to tell the parents. So the parents would have had they have no idea. So let's say your child gets vaccinated. They choose to do that because they fall into, everybody influencing them to do what they're going to do, which is what kids do. Okay. Lots of examples of that. And they choose to get vaccinated at school, or they go to a clinic and get vaccinated. And because of that law, because of that bill that's passed, no record of that has to be shared with the parent. Now, 3 days later, let's say that child starts having severe medical reactions from the vaccine. But you as the parent don't know that. You don't know that the child had any kind of medical procedure whatsoever. And even when you take them to the hospital, you've got nothing to say. Let's say the child is now in a coma and can't speak for themselves, and you're at the hospital as a parent going crazy because you have no idea what's happening. And it's the vaccine that caused it, and you have no idea to do that. The people that are making these bills, why they can't come to that conclusion that this is a possibility and how dangerous this is insanity. So follow my train of thinking here and look at what I'm talking about. This is where medical freedom is so important. Taking away the parent's right, or their not even right, but their God-given ability to control what's happening with their own child. This is their child. To take it away from the government, to take it away from medical doctors. They do not control my health. They don't control my child's health, nor will they ever control those things. That's bodily autonomy. That's medical choice. That's medical freedom. That's health freedom. I don't care how you want to put it, but that is the bottom line. That is the basis of this whole argument, this whole discussion. I should not have to have a conversation that makes me have to prove the safety of the vaccine. I should not have to be the one having the conversation to prove that vaccines cause autism. I should not have to be having a conversation that proves that I have the right to decide what goes into my body. These are things that should be self-evident. These are things that should not be a national debate, a conversation. It should just be a given. This is health freedom, and that is point number one. There's lots of things we can talk about with vaccines, and as I always say, I'm going to. But this is the beginning point of that conversation. This is where we should, all of us, I think, should be able to agree with that. You know, giving a child the ability to decide that a vaccine is what I want, regardless, and then not be able to tell the parent of what medical procedure was occurring. That should stun most of you who are hearing that maybe for the first time, that exists. It still exists. It's out there. Okay. These are things that we need to change. So there is an organization called the National Vaccine Information Center. National Vaccine Information Center. The woman who runs NVIC, her name is Barbara Loe Fisher. She is the individual who wrote one of the earliest vaccine books that questioned vaccines, which was called A Shot in the Dark. Excellent book. One of the very first ones written. It's a good one to begin with if you're starting your journey. She runs the National Vaccine Information Center. It's been around since the 80s. It's been around for a long time. And if you go to their website, I want to say it's under, yes, it is. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share this actually. It's under, here you go. Get rid of that. All right, so here is their website, National Vaccine Information Center. Under resources right here, tons of great stuff, okay? Tons of great stuff. But if you go all the way down here to protecting and expanding state vaccine exemptions, I'm pretty sure this should give us what we want here. And then here we go. Okay, this is talking about exemptions under attack. This may not give us what we want here. On this website somewhere, somewhere is the information on vaccine mandates, and it gives you that for every state. So I didn't find it there for you, but you can go and look yourself. It's there somewhere. I know I've seen it over and over again over the years, but it lists every state and it tells you which exemptions you have available to you as a parent, as an adult. And it even gives you updates on what's happening in your state regarding mandates and exemptions, et cetera. So it's a good resource, and I would definitely bookmark that and have that to go back with. So, all right. Start calming down after that. The topic of vaccines gets me riled. It does. It inflames my blood, as the old expression goes. I am incredibly hopeful for the future with the way things are moving now. And I will reiterate that what I'm hopeful for is just some simple things. Number one, don't make it a mandate. Personal choice, personal freedom. Don't force me, don't force my kids to do something against our will that could create bodily harm to us. That's something I should be able to decide. Yeah, but you may get the disease and die. Well, That's possible. Okay. But I could also get the vaccine and die. And so if I get the disease and I live, I'm going to have lifelong immunity. Most situations, it's going to give me lifelong immunity for myself or my child. If I get the vaccine, good proof for that either. Okay. The research on that sucks. So give me good research, do a better job making the products, do a better job researching the products, and then you prove it to me. It shouldn't be my job to prove it to you. You prove it to me. I'm the consumer. I'm the one you're trying to force it into my body or my child's body. The onus is on you, not me. Okay. And so, yeah, that's where we start. That's where we start. So there's 16 points in my book. I think we can do a pretty good job making at least 16 episodes or more out of those points. And so point one, personal freedom. Ruminate on that. If you don't immediately agree with that as a point, then what I would ask you is to think long and hard before you answer this, but to think long and hard on that and then answer why. Why do I not believe in personal health, personal freedom for health, to be able to choose what is injected into a person's body? What is it about that scares me? What is creating my beliefs that would make me want to take away personal freedoms and health from somebody else and force them to get injected? And now, of course, this is comments, and people make all sorts of crazy, ridiculous, inflamed comments on, social media. But dozens and dozens of times I've read comments from people saying that people should be held down and injected. Held down, hold them down and inject them. That's how scared these individuals are of the things that are out there, the boogeymen that can get them. And so, one of the things that we need to cover is talking about the history of vaccines and talking about the misinformation that is being sold to everyone as a bill of goods regarding that topic. I have some guests in mind for that topic that I would like to bring on. So I'm going to start looking into seeing if I can get these individuals to come on and share their wisdom when it comes to the history of vaccines. I think you would be very served with these individuals. So with that said, we're going to start wrapping up this episode of The Flip Side. Teresa, I hope that helped. I hope that was a good starting point for you, and I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope everybody else does too. Once again, as always, please follow along, increase the numbers, make the world know, and send me emails. Send me suggestions for episodes, questions. If there's something I've said that you want to, have me elaborate on or what have you, send that as well. I would love to see that. And so point one, personal health, medical choice, health freedom. That's where we begin the conversation. I would say probably if we can't come to an agreement on that, you're probably not going to come to an agreement on anything, because that's really where it begins. If the bottom line is, I don't care what you say about vaccines, you have to do them. Conversation over. There is no conversation to have. And unfortunately, I've had far too many instances like that. I can't call them conversations. Far too many interactions with people that there was nothing I could have said, nothing at all that I could have said that would have had them even open their mind for 2 seconds to talk about vaccines. And hey, that's something. If you find yourself arguing CDC bullet points, okay, believing and maybe even feeling your blood go up every single comment made on the legacy media, NBC, ABC, CBS, etc., New York Times newspaper, what a rag. If you read those articles or you hear those newscasts or you hear that information and automatically your brain says, and it starts to agree with that, that's when I would say, do me a favor, back up just for a second and say two things. Number one, why am I believing that so hardcore and I am not able to listen to this other side? Why is that the case? Second thing is, why can't I look at this information myself and come up with my own decisions? Don't just go by what the CDC tells you or, any of these other agencies. Look the information up. Del Bigtree did an excellent job with that. He pulls out the vaccine inserts. I mean, come on. These inserts are really long. There's lots of small print. I mean, I definitely have to have my glasses on to read those things. Very small print. Written by the pharmaceutical companies. Mandated by law that they have to have an insert in there. And in the insert, not only do they say in black and white, in clear, plain English, that there's no placebo and that the safety study was done for 3 days, 5 days. You did a safety study for 3 days and with no placebo, and you're telling me this is a safe product? Come on. That's in the insert. Also in the insert is the list of things that have gone wrong that they did see in 3 days, okay? 3 days with no placebo, and they saw encephalitis. Encephalitis is brain inflammation, folks. What do you think can be a causative factor towards autism? Brain inflammation could do that. That's in the inserts. So when you've got your article being written in the New York Times with some a-hole who is very strongly saying that Kennedy is a conspiracy theorist, all the media is still saying that. All the legacy media is still calling him a conspiracy theorist. Is it a conspiracy to talk about safety studies being poor and wanting better safety when we can look in the insert and see that it's true? Is it conspiracy to say that it's a possibility that vaccines have a causative factor in autism, okay? When we know that they can cause encephalopathy and encephalitis. It's not a stretch of the imagination, folks, and it's not conspiracy. And if the media that you're listening to is still selling that idea to you, if the CD is going to put that in black and white print on their website, then they're the ones that are spreading misinformation. They're the ones that are denying science. They're the ones that are lying to the public because it's in the inserts. It's in the research. It's there. So that is the bottom line there, folks. So question it. If you're not questioning it, then question why you're not questioning it and start from that point. All right. I'm going to wrap it up right there. I think we've done a good job. I have done a good job with this point number 1 of personal freedom. Okay. This MAHA alliance, this MAHA movement, what used to be health freedom, I'm probably still going to refer it to that all over and over again because that's what I've been doing for a long time, is moving in the right direction. Okay. We'd love to have you aboard. And I'm going to be here to help try and educate you to this information. So interact, please, and let's get this going even stronger. Until then, and until next week, and until the next episode, goodbye.